Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back with another Talk About Nothing. This time, my guest, I know him as Mark. You guys know him as Mark from Slowly Read. What is going on, my man?
What's going on, brother?
You having a good time up there in the Great White North?
I am. It's actually really warming up right now, so I can't really be mad. It's like 40 degrees, which sounds really cold to a lot of people, but that is like a heat wave for us in January.
Yeah, about to say, shoot, it's 40 here in Houston right now. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
very
It's
weird.
super
It's
warm.
very unusual that you and I would have the same weather going on.
Yeah, I know Texas and Alaska. Yeah.
About like 8 feet less snow or whatever. But before we get going, I just want to congratulate you, man. 3,000 subscribers. You're on your way.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I didn't even know that I had hit that. Then somebody had said something, and then I was like, "Hey, what?" And I had to go in and check. It was like, "Yes, awesome."
That's awesome. I mean, I mean, you've been doing this a little under 2 years now, right? I mean, you just kind of
Yeah, I'm
started
coming
from
up on
zero.
2 years this spring, so it's been a process.
Yeah, no, that's great. You got to, I mean, pretty much everyone, anytime I ever mention Grimdark, someone always says, "Oh, Slowly Read has a really good review on that." So you kind of have gotten that reputation as like the Grimdark guy now. Is that a badge you wear with honor or
Yeah, kind of. I mean, though Grimdark is a confusing ass fucking thing.
right?
Uh it's not. I'm okay. I'm okay. Like when I started my channel, I kind of knew that it might go in that direction. I tried to read like stuff that was a lot like out of my wheelhouse, but
Mm.
eventually it all just kind of went into the grimdark, shadow there. And yeah, I mean, people started kind of like pointing like, hey, that guy, he knows all about grimdark, blah blah blah. And I don't know everything about grimdark, like as I just said, it's so confusing. But I do live in that corner of the of the fictional world. I hang out there a lot, so I know some things about the subgenre, and I just love dark fantasy and gritty fucked up stories. So yeah, I guess in a way, to be known as a grimdark guy, I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, see, then every series that you have where you say it's grimdark, but like that isn't actually grimdark, it's blank, and that's when you start getting into those subgenres that confuse me. Where I'm just like, look, it's horror, it's sci-fi, or it's fantasy for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, that's
If it's Joe Abercrombie, it's grimdark. Because
yeah.
he's going to heal himself, and I think
It,
that's actually how we were introduced was through Philip talking about First Law on his channel. So
yeah,
I
most likely, yeah,
First Law is a
yeah,
series I think that we're both going to have me a good thing to say, right?
yeah. I just finished Red
Red Country.
Country not too long ago, so I'm getting ready for the newest trilogy. And man, I've had a great time though. Honestly, I think the hardest books for me of his were the first one, Blade itself, and Red Country. So the first one and the last one of his Red were probably the hardest ones for me to read, mostly because of the pace. They were
Mhm.
just kind of slow.
Yeah, I see. When I got to First Law of the trilogy, the trilogy was complete when I found it, when I discovered it. So I read them all back to back to back. So I remember thinking it was kind of okay. This is moderately paced, I guess you say, but just didn't reading them all back to back to back like that was a little easier for me. But yeah, funny you say that because Red Country is by far my least favorite of
Yeah,
those books, which is weird because I do love me some like outlaw Josie Wales and westerns like that,
right.
which what he was going for. I
Yeah,
think
and
for
you
me
can
in
kind
that
of
was
get
just
that.
I'm a big Casca fan. I didn't like what he did with Casca in that book. It really dragged me down. But I don't want to get too much into spoilers for people who
Yeah,
haven't
yeah, yeah.
haven't
Me
read that.
neither.
But
But that's the thing. It's one of those is like as a same Akaska had
mm,
like really wormed his way into my black heart and
mm,
just has a permanent place there. So I suggest or recommend that book to people. I'm like, you gotta read it. I mean, one way or the other, if you're a
yeah,
Casca fan, you might get pissed, but at the same time, it's like as a Casca fan, you need to read that story because it's a pretty big part of his story.
yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I thought that was really slow, but it was weird because I really got into the relationships that he was developing in that book. I really liked Shy, or was it Shy South
Mm.
and Temple?
Simple,
I want
yeah.
to say, yeah, those two, man. I don't know what it was about those two. I really dug it, and that's what kind of helped me kind of keep going, through the pages because it wasn't exactly the most action packed, like everything.
Not a blistering pace at all.
No, no. I mean, when there was some stuff that pops off, and when it does, you're like, yeah, we're reading Abercrombie, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
still.
but I say even the worst Joe Abercrombie books usually at least pretty dang good.
Yeah, I
So
mean that's it. It's like it sounds weird because you're like you're probably used to like kind of like just throwing massive amounts of praise. So when you're just like talking about how it was just really good, it sounds like it's bad, but no, it's really good.
Yeah, you just have actually some things to critique there. I'm jealous that you don't have to wait with Age of Madness. Had to wait a year.
Yeah, I know. I kind of
It's
lucked out on
great.
that one. I thought I didn't. That was kind of unintentional, but I'm glad that it landed like that, because now, like you with the first trilogy, I can just read all three of the other ones. You know,
Yeah.
with
Are you
without
planning to do
having to
those
wait.
back to back to back, or are you going to split
Yeah,
them
I'm
up?
gonna do them pretty close to one another. I'm gonna try to do it at least within a month from one another.
Mm.
If I'm really sucked in, I'll just smash them all out one after the other.
I'm willing to bet that you will be. It's enough that you're going to feel familiar, but it's got enough new characters that you're not going to feel like it's a retread or anything like
Yeah,
that.
that's
So,
cool.
Philip, he likes that trilogy better than the original one. So,
I've heard that from a lot of people. A lot of people who read all three books. I think the general consensus was they were kind of like on the fence, or just, not 100% sure when it started. But by the end of that trilogy, people were fucking so satisfied, so like, screaming about it. And just, I was like, okay, that's what's up. I'm like, I can't
for
wait
me,
to
it's
get
one of those
into it.
things. It's like you're not ever going to beat the Star Wars trilogy. No matter how good new Star Wars movies would be, it's like it's too much nostalgia there. I might admit, but the characters are every bit as good. And then when you see some of those greatest hits show up, it really does rubs the old member berries a little bit, I think.
Yeah,
So let's
sure.
talk about Booktube here. What really influenced you to go ahead and turn on the camera and decide to do this? Was it any particular thing, or you just like me, you just wanted an outlet to talk about these things?
I did want an outlet to talk about it. I mean, I don't really run in like reading circles. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I don't have friends that read really, or if they do, it's like very few, far between. And they're probably not reading a whole lot of stuff like I am. So I would read a book and be super, excited about it, and have no one to fucking talk to about it.
Yeah,
And
same here.
I mean, that's one of the most annoying things ever. I mean, because people do, like, when we watch films and we love a movie, one of the first things we do is we go tell everybody about it, and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool, cool." But if like you read an awesome book and you try to tell someone about it and they're like, "Uh-huh," it's kind of defeating. So yeah, I did want an outlet to talk about books, and I mean, and I definitely wanted to talk about some books I felt like weren't being talked about at all. I thought that there was a lot of concentration on certain authors, or
Yeah.
certain, I mean, and it makes sense. If you want to have a successful channel, like, go with the big hits, man, because people are going to flock to that. But I wanted to put stuff out there that was going to, for one, my main goal when I started was to try to help people kind of like myself that weren't really readers, but discovered it and then fell in love with it. Because I think that there's a lot of potential readers out there that if they just knew a couple more things, that they might understand it's not a boring deal. A lot of people correlate reading to like work,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
think about school or whatever, but it's like they don't realize how much fun they can have reading a goddamn book. So I really wanted to start a channel and kind of tap into those people. The funny thing is those people are not on YouTube looking for me.
Sure.
so
Sure.
so really the people I get a hold of are people that are already very experienced readers and just want to hear about the fucking books.
Yeah.
But
No, I think you're right on that, because I did start doing this with Wheel of Time. Had no idea it had the fandom it did, but I mean, still, Wheel of Time's huge on YouTube. But yeah, I was like, I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about First Law, because I don't feel like enough people are talking about it. So I kind of had something similar there. And so many people have said, that I introduced them to First Law, I introduced them to Stephen King and stuff like that. That's just like, as a content creator, that's the most awesome thing. But yeah, I knew no one in real life. I mean,
yeah.
my wife was tired of me talking about every Stephen King book I read, so she was happy that I did this. But I think now she's kind of like, well, you never talk to me about these books anymore.
That's
So
funny.
I was like, hey, you know where the channel is. You're a subscriber. You can find it. What is your I mean, you actually got your wife to do a Q&A with you. That's
Yes.
impressive. I can't get my wife on the camera. She's like,
Yeah. I was really like blown away when I think we were on like a little vacation or something like that. And then like before we came home, she was like, when we get home, we should do a video together. And I was like, what? I'm like, fuck, let's do it.
I tried to get her after I read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. That's her favorite book. And when I finally read it last year, I tried to get her to come do a review for me. She's like, I'll do a written one for you. I'm not getting on the camera. I was like, well, written reviews don't really do very much on the channel, but all right, yeah, maybe I'll just read it. I don't know. That's good, but it's always good to have their support. So
Absolutely. I mean, without her help, I mean, most of this shit doesn't get done.
Right. So what are you reading right now? Are you in between books, or are you in the middle of something?
I just finished last night. I finished Blackwing by Ed McDonald.
I've been interested in that series. I have the trilogy.
The Raven Marks trilogy, man. I fucking really, really dug it. It really tapped into something that I'm really interested in right now. I'm really digging like kind of like high fantasy stories, but not necessarily like with high fantasy races, just more like high fantasy worlds, like these worlds that are definitely not like our own. They're very magical or just crazy and fucked up, and they bring all this fantastical stuff, and it's just very imaginative and fun. But the one thing that Ed McDonald's doing there in that book is that he made it's very cool and very imaginative, but it's also pretty dark. And he made everything that he made it to where everything is just ugly. Like the people are ugly, the fucking, the backdrop is ugly, but it's not like you want to read about it. I don't know. It's really cool. It's a very big like mix mesh of genres though too. It's kind of like dark fantasy. It's kind of like flintlock fantasy. It's almost got like steampunky kind of stuff. Now, I hate to say steampunk. It's almost more like Fallout style, sort of. I don't know. It's a whole lot of different things all in one, and it was a lot of goddamn fun. The ending really blew me away. There was a part of it where I was like, maybe it's not a 5-star book, but it's still pretty good. And then I hit that ending, and I was like, it's still not a 5-star book, but holy shit, this thing really went out on a bang. I really enjoyed it.
So it sounds like you would recommend this.
Yes, I would. I definitely would. There's a couple. Because I've been kind of out for a minute. I'm sitting on like several books I need to review, but that one was definitely one of the ones I enjoyed the most out of the several I have to review. The other ones, when I read the the Swords trilogy by Michael Moorcock. It's 3 books. It's Knight of Swords, Queen of Swords, King of Swords.
That's not Elric though, is it? It's not
no,
Elric.
it's like his quorum stuff. So it's really neat because Michael Moorcock messes with the multiverse. So it's like you're dealing with like characters who are kind of like they're like Elric and Quorum are kind of the same person, sort of, in different like dimensions. And Elric kind of serves like this god of chaos, and in Quorum's world he's serving like the god of law, but they're both what's called an eternal champion. It's really crazy. It goes, but the thing is it's just so imaginative. It really captured that thing that I've always loved about fantasy, just the fantastic, the things that are just that are unreal. They're just like, whoa, that's awesome, and Michael Moorcock really has a knack for that. Like he will put all 3 of those books, probably page count wise, amount to a regular book, but there is so much shit packed in there. He's just very imaginative, and it's kind of pulpy style. But goddamn it, that especially Knight of Swords, the first book, there's some stuff in there that when I read it, I went, goddamn, not only is it so like very, very violent, like even to today's standards, it was like there's some parts that are very violent and very brutal, but it's just also so goddamn imaginative. I just wish that there was more books like that out there. I say that, but then now I'm starting to actually find them, like books like The Vagrant were really cool because it's very weird, but it's just original. It doesn't feel like another fantasy world that you've been in. And I'm really digging that kind of stuff lately.
That kind of sounds like what I said about Robert E. Howard is, you can read like the whole Conan is like basically the size of one epic fantasy novel. But I mean, these are like 10, 20 page stories. And it's just like, holy shit, what he could pack into just that little tiny bit. And when I talked about Robert E. Howard, I got a lot of people saying you got to read some Elric. I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I think that Rob Howard and Michael Moorcock are probably pretty similar in that aspect. Like
they're putting out those collections soon. I think starting next year of Elric, and I think I'm going to start getting to just volume 1, 2, and 3. We've got release dates already. And that's
Nice.
kind of what I'm
Yeah.
going to start
I
with. That.
have the first 3 books. I've read just the first one, so I'm a little behind. The cool thing is like I said, like with those Eternal Champion books, because there's other characters too, like Hawkmoon and Eric Kessie and stuff. They're basically all the Eternal Champion in their dimension. But there's crossover. So like if you've read the other characters, it becomes a lot of fun when you start to get that crossover.
Yeah, that's why I want to read some Cold Atlantis and things like that. More Robert E. Howard than just Conan, because
Yeah, I know. I want to read Conan too. Like I only really know Conan as Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. Most people do.
You know, like, and that's not a bad thing to me because Arnold fucked shit up, and I loved him. You know?
I mean, hey, it's easy to imagine Arnold up here while you're reading those. I mean, for sure.
Oh, I bet.
But that and Solomon Kane are some ones I definitely like to dip into. But before I forget about the Ed McDonald stuff, I think this is a good segue here. Is when I was first really looking for more stuff, kind of like First Law, and I just typed into Google. I said books similar to Joe Abercrombie. And 3 authors came up: Michael R. Fletcher, which I still haven't read. And I know that you love the Manifest Destiny books. There's a Manifest Destiny?
Manifest Illusions.
Manifest Destiny is the real thing. That's quite a little different. That one, Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire and Ed McDonald's books there. So I started with Broken Empire. And I know that we're a little different on this. So I think it's a good place to talk about. I know you love Mark Lawrence. All I have read is 2.5 books by him. I didn't finish Emperors. I liked Prince of Thorns a lot. I liked it a lot. Second one I thought was like okay, and then the third book I was just kind of like, I know George your guy, man, but oh my god, I was like, he's just a lunatic, and I just cannot find anything about this character that I want to see succeed. So
he's pretty brutal.
What is it you say you like about Mark Lawrence so much?
What do I like about Mark Lawrence so much? Well, I'll tell you right now what I like about Mark Lawrence so much is that he's a guy that isn't afraid to take a different swing at things. So, I mean, if you look at he's wrote, several trilogies now, and he really changes things up each time. You know, like even from Broken Empire to Red Queen's War, which is both in the same world, you're going to see a big difference just in like how in the writing and the way he approaches character development. Then you switch into, which I've DNF'd Red Sister, but I'm going to get back into it. You get into that, and that's like where boom, now he's doing third person. He's no longer trying to do the first person deal, and he's working with a female character. And then you get into like his Impossible Times trilogy stuff, which is not fantasy at all. It's like it's kind of like people say it's like Stranger Things. I don't think it's anything like Stranger Things.
Told me 80s nostalgia.
Yes, I think if you were a kid that grew up in the 80s or the 90s and played a lot of tabletop games, you will probably really like it because it'll remind you of hanging out with your friends. But once again, it's just the way the stories are. They're just so different from one another. And then you have his Books of Ice, which once again take place in the same world as Books of the Ancestor. But it's, I mean, from what I read of Red Sister, and I've read the 2 books in the Books of the Ice, it just once again way different. It feels like somebody who's always trying new things. And I can appreciate that as much as I want him to stay doing the same thing.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah.
You know, as much as I want him to just continue to pump out Broken Empire books, but I got to give it up to him for actually trying to constantly bring you something new, something different. That takes a lot of talent. Like it's not easy to write. You know what I mean? And then once you got a good thing, it's really hard to not like break out of that rut. So currently I'm very impressed with Mark Lawrence because of just his range. I feel like he's got quite a bit of depth to his writing. Like he can write all kinds of different stories, not just a grimdark story. In fact, I feel like he's progressively gotten further and further away from being a grimdark author or whatever. But back in the day, the thing that really got me with Mark Lawrence, I was coming off of, gosh darn it, Brent Weeks's Night Angel trilogy. And that was the first time I had ever actually like gotten into fantasy books, because before that I had almost finished the Silmarillion, but I couldn't do it, you know, like
It's
which
like
did.
reading a Malazan instruction manual.
I did later, and I fucking love the Silmarillion. Yeah. But at the time, I just wasn't ready. I couldn't, that was just too much exposition, too much stuff, whatever. But when I got my hands on the Night Angel trilogy, I had never read anything that was gritty. And I know a lot of people that say like, oh, it's like YA, but at the same time too, I didn't really even know what YA was.
Right.
So I wouldn't know what to point out and be like, oh, that's definitely kiddie-ish or whatever. Sure, I know that there's some stuff in there when they were kids or whatnot. Anyway, by the time I read that trilogy, I was just so blown away because I was like, fuck, I didn't know there was fantasy books like this. I thought they all had to have characters that were shining good examples and, whatever.
That was me when I discovered Song of Ice and Fire.
Like, and then I was like, so what else is out there like this? And I was like, what are the darkest books in fantasy? And then this was, many, many, many years ago. So what popped up was all these things, and it started these words, grimdark.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is grimdark?
Yeah. And that was your awakening, huh?
Yeah. And then I get on this list. And so kind of like you, where you were like, after reading Abercrombie, where you had like 3 guys to choose from, I had this like grimdark list I found on the internet, and I was like, I'm going to read these guys, you know? And it was kind of a same thing, kind of a toss of the coin, whether I started with Blade itself or Broken Empire. And I just happened to start with Broken Empire. And I think I fell in love with Mark Lawrence because it was so brutal. It was like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, it's
like
I call those books nihilism, not grimdark.
Dude,
so it's just
like I like picked this up so I could read about scoundrels and horrible dudes. But you might have just taken it to a place where I don't know if I could follow, like in the first 7 pages.
Yeah, guys, read the Goodreads reviews of Prince of Thorns. People talking about just like the first chapter and about rage quitting after the first chapter. And why I actually wanted to read it was because of that. Honestly, I talked about when I talked to Jay Kristoff about this, about like sometimes I read the negative reviews on purpose to see what pissed people off and be like, well, I gotta check out. And then I actually tweeted Mark Lawrence about it, and he said, yeah, the Rage Machine got me so much sales. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do that too. I think like people's negative reviews are almost like what I do look for, because I'm like, oh, what, you say that there's no likable characters? Oh, I want to read that book.
Let's check this out. So I guess before we move away from Mark Lawrence, I should ask you is a lot of people had told me, I said, if I don't really care for Broken Empire, should I continue with Red Queen's War? And a lot of people told me, no, you should go to Book of the Ancestor. What would you think? Because you said it's pretty different.
No, I honestly would tell you, by all means, get into Red Queen's War, because I think that you would love it. I think that Red Queen's War was surprisingly, as far as tone-wise, is way more on par with First Law.
Okay.
It's dark, but it is funny. It's funny as fuck. Like the main character, Jalen Kendith, he's a coward. He's he's kind of like almost built to be a character that when you read it on paper, you're like, why on earth would I want to follow this guy? He's not, you know what I mean? He's like a womanizing coward. He's, there's not going to be a whole lot of, he doesn't have a whole lot of attributes that are shining and that I want to like spend a whole lot of time with. But Mark Lawrence writes this guy so perfect, and he's like very self-deprecating. So it's just really hilarious to like to read the way he sees everything. And he gets kind of like clicked up with this Viking character who is too happy. Like he's just too nice. So you have like, it's kind of like a salt and pepper kind of character, like relationship, which just plays out to a T. It's so good. And Mark Lawrence's writing got phenomenally better. As much as I like Broken Empire better, that's more of a tone and personal thing. His writing is way better in Red Queen's War. And I guarantee you, like I say it all the time, if you're somebody who really likes First Law, I think you would love Red Queen's War.
Well, that's the best sales pitch you can give me. So that's pretty good.
There's two, I think. Another one I would suggest to you is David Ragg's Articles of Faith. It's a duology. It's finished. It just came, like the second book came out last year. It's a lot like Abercrombie stuff. It's different, so doesn't feel like he's like stealing or hacking off of them or anything. But it's the closest, especially when it comes to that dialogue and the name calling and just the rough around the edges kind of characters. It's a little bit more positive than First Law, but it's right in that kind of same vein. And honestly, when I read it, I thought of you. I thought like the Articles of Faith is probably you of all the booktubers. I think that's the one I'd give you that duology.
That's the first I've heard of it. I'll check it out. It sounds kind of similar to what I said about Godblind by Anna Stevens, in that she it's not like First Law, but the banter really is. The language, the insults and things like that, just the way that people talk, the way that they can fit in something about somebody's cock every other sentence, or something like that.
Yeah. There's
funny,
very
funny banter like that
cussing in that one. And the cool thing about Articles of Faith as well, but this is something I think that deters people. There's no magic in it. It's fantasy, but there's no magic. But you won't ever get to that point where you're like, where's the magic? It's such an adventure and shit's going on and you're having so much fun and it feels so much like a fantasy adventure story. There's never a part where I was wanting magic. It's badass.
I read every Brandon Sanderson Cosmere book in 2020, and it made me realize I like soft magic systems. I think I'm kind of burned out on magic systems.
Me too. I don't want it to be explained anymore. I want
it's like,
crazy.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up with like Lord of the Rings, and it's like, well, how can Gandalf do magic? He's a fucking wizard. That's how he can do magic. Same thing with Baez. I don't need to understand how he does the magic. I mean, maybe that's just the style of reader. When you start getting into the science, like the fourth Stormlight Archive book, and it's just like, I don't need to know this much right now. I don't need to know how the sausage is made on something like this. So some people love that. Some people aren't. I don't know.
When I first, because I mean, I don't think that's how it was, back in the day. There wasn't these crazy hard magic systems. It was just magic, And when I first got my hands on, what is it? The Final Empire, the first book of the Mistborn trilogy.
Yeah.
So when I read that, I was blown away. I was just like, same. Dude, like, what the fuck?
I'm like looking at the elemental table and all that shit and see what makes what.
This is creative as all shit. Like ingesting metals, and they do different. I'm like trying to explain it to my buddies. Like, they eat metals and then they can like lift themselves up, and they're like, and
they're like, and you wonder why I don't read fantasy.
Yeah. This is why we don't talk about books, Mark. But I mean, when I first got my like hooks into that, it was amazing. It was like, well, shit, dude, this is insanely good. Like, cause he's making all this stuff make sense, which is kind of a first for me. So it was really new and shiny and awesome. And I guess maybe I then expected other people to be doing it as well. But much probably like you, years later, it's just like, man, I've kind of gone back to like, I'm over it, dude. Like, I'm like, dude, if you want this thing explained to death, I feel like you should be in sci-fi.
I think the only person that's done it as good as Brandon Sanderson, if you really are looking for that, was you talked about Brent Weeks with Lightbringer. I think his magic system definitely. But when you started talking about Brent Weeks, I started talking about, well, this is 2 series this guy's wrote, and I've not finished either series because I've just, my thing with Night Angels, like I appreciate that it got a lot of people interested in fantasy. I will definitely give it credit for that. For me, what I said was like, I didn't feel like it was YA as much as it couldn't make up its mind if it wanted to be young adult or if it wanted to be really brutal.
Like it bounced
it was like I felt like he started writing a YA story, and then he played Assassin's Creed for like 12 hours one weekend and said, "Oh, I'm going to work in all this violence now." So it didn't really work. But I understood. Okay, maybe I'm a little too old for this. But then I love Lightbringer, and Brent Weeks is like M. Night Shyamalan. It's got all the talent in the world, but he always tries to force some kind of twist in there that he doesn't need, and it ruins stuff. And the 4th book of that series is the fastest I have seen a series jump the shark in my life. It is just like, I don't know if you finished it or if you even started. It's just
no, I've never even dared to go into it because I've heard there's 2 series that I've kind of ignored just because I've heard so much. And one of them's Lightbringer. The other one is Demon Cycle. Yeah, which I
very
know,
true. Another one that started great, and oh my god,
I'm like, dude, I want to read it bad because I'm like, is it that fucked up, or did it really go off like into some other deal? Or
well, it's not like Brent Weeks. Brent Weeks put like just forced some just thing that just, it was maddening. It completely broke the series because you're like, you just did this, and it just made stuff that happened in books 1 through 3 make no sense, like whatsoever. And, I don't bag on authors like that. I'm not that guy, but that was just one was like, I feel like you've got so much potential, so much to be like an amazing writer, and you keep doing stuff like this. With Demon Cycle, he just kind of lost his way. It was like the characters that you were really interested in at the beginning, he got further and further away from them as the series went on. It was like,
Gotcha.
I want to know about these characters, and you being a big tattoo guy and stuff, you would love all the stuff where they're painting the wards and stuff. It's really, really an awesome setup, man. But
yeah, I've heard the magic system is amazing.
yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not up there with Lightbringer, but it's really good. But yeah, that's 2 series. I think I bought them all on hardcover and thought these are going to be just like amazing epic series for me. And I'm like, why did I spend that much money on those?
Yeah.
That's book collector problems. But hey, I brought up the tattoos. I want to talk about when I talked to Jay Kristoff. And as you know, he has a lot of tattoos. And when we were reading Empire of the Vampire, I'm like, wow, all this stuff about tattoos. I wonder if this is why Mark was into it. So first, I want to thank you for introducing me to that book or making me give it a chance. Yeah, because I love it. I'm almost done with his Nevernight books now.
Yeah, those are pretty kick ass.
Yes.
Yeah, I have the first one. I need to read it. I've been kind of like on the wall or on the fence, like, maybe it's not as good.
If you liked Empire of the Vampire, I think you're gonna like it a lot.
Sweet. Man. That's all really all I heard. It had a really cool like prose in it. That's why I picked it up a while back. But
and if you liked like the language, the dialogue, the cussing combinations and stuff that he had in Empire of the Vampire, you're gonna love it. It's so good. But yeah, I think it's kind of what you said with Night Angel. The people are like, oh, it's YA because they saw like those covers and stuff. And Jay Kristoff has wrote YA also.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you can have a young female protagonist in a book without it being young adult, guys. You really can. Yeah. These books are seriously adult fantasy with just young protagonists, I think. But yeah, Kristoff, that's probably my most pleasant surprise the last like 3 months. Is this an author I didn't even know if I was ever going to try.
It really now he's probably me, man. I was not ready for it to be as good as I found it to be. You know what I mean? I just was like, honestly, I jumped into it because it was chunky. I was like, I think I'm just ready for something big. You know what I mean? Like I was like, fuck, I want to read. I was
interested because the cover's awesome. I mean, the cover is badass.
What's funny about that is like, how everybody hates the cover
because the shirtless vampire. Yeah.
You know what's so funny is like, I'll say it right here is I love this cover. I honestly preferred this one over the other one, but it's, whatever. Everyone's got their taste. This is actually done by Jason Chan, the same guy who did like the Broken Empire covers.
I think it's more just that because of the
shirtless
vampire genre being hijacked, by like tween females. I think us guys like us, our age, we see that we're like, no, man, I ain't reading that. I don't want to read that sparkly vampire shit.
That's facts though, right? Like vampires have definitely, when I grew up, they were scary. You know what I mean? Like your most beautiful vampire that was out there was Bela Lugosi. Like the black and white, like Hollywood, and he still had a very like ominous kind of like feel to him, so then fast forward, now it's like they're glittering or that they're mainly used for romance.
I grew up with Dracula and Anne Rice, and I was like, Anne Rice vampires, like, no, they're deep, but they'll still also eat you.
Anne Rice, rest in peace. That sucks losing her, but Anne Rice is the first author I read. Interview of the Vampire is the very first book I picked up and read. And yeah, dude, I have to admit, like that was something that was like there's a lot of romance in those books too, like in a way, you know what I mean? Because like the immortal really do fall in love with one another because they're the only ones that can spend an eternity together, kind of deal. But yeah, I don't know.
That's what Empire of the Vampire did. Is it made me feel like, okay, vampires can still be really awesome, if we can continue to do this. So the fact that he told me he was really influenced by Salem's Lot, another one of my favorite vampire books. So
I watched that interview and it was really cool because I swear it was like he was kind of starting to name some stuff off, and I was like, I knew it. Like like
I still got to check out Brotherhood of the Wolf. I've never seen
Brotherhood of the Wolf is awesome, dude. It's like kind of old or whatever, but it's an awesome like kind of mystery thriller fantasy movie. It's really dope. Have you seen Krull?
Yeah, hell yeah. I watched it with my kid.
I just rewatched Krull the other day. I was like, God damn, this movie's good.
Yeah, it's great for kids too, man. I think it's a really good introduction of fantasy for them. But I thought that when he said that every time he finishes a series, he gets new tattoos. So I thought that was really, really cool. So
Yeah, that is dope. Yeah, and he listens to a lot of metal and stuff. I
he
was
sent me
listening
a
on his.
list of about like 20 metal bands after that interview
Yeah,
to check
yeah.
out
I
because
was, I
metal in the
recognize
States is
some
really
of the ones that
suffering.
he put. But yeah, when Empire the Vampire, I don't know about you, but what did you feel about the very, very beginning? You know, it's like the intro or the prelude or whatever. It's kind of like Gabe talking and like at the very end there, he's like, God hates us all or
Oh
whatever
yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah,
of deal.
yeah. Why he's such an insufferable cock?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
honestly, that was what brought
It
me
got my
in
attention right
when
away.
I
Yeah.
read that. I was like, okay, like like we're reading this. What's funny though is I see all over the internet, people are bashing the fuck out of it, like, oh, this sounds like something like a goth 15-year-old would write,
Yeah.
trying to be dark and like, oh,
I felt that it's weird the criticisms I hear, like not reading Nevernight, really enjoying it, and the criticisms I hear about it, and I'm just like, did you guys read it? Like, no. Like, how do you know this shit? So I was like, he's just got some misconceptions about his material. I don't know really what it is.
oh
But
yeah, oh yeah,
I think anytime you try to have, for younger audiences and you try to have adult audiences, people try to. I think V. Schwab does this as well, and you kind of have this people who I don't know. This fandoms kind of pit themselves against each other. Like, I like the adult stuff, I like the YA stuff, and I'm like, I kind of look at it like, if you grow up with, like I said this about Red Rising, is a lot of people were like, oh, I thought Red Rising was, YA until I read it. And I said, I think it's like it was aimed at those people who did like grow up with like Hunger Games and they wanted like that next step. In Red Rising series, each book just gets darker and darker, like so much so that I thought that book 5 was ghost written by Joe Abercrombie. It was so grim there. So, I mean, I think it's just she's one of those transitionary authors, after you kind of like moved on. That's why I think people love Name of the Wind so much, because it was the first thing they read after Harry Potter, things like that. I always kind of look at it like that. It's a transition. And so when I asked him about these Nevernight books, about that, I was like, so you had been a YA author before that. Did you get anybody that was like shocked when they picked those up? And so he said that's why he had that first chapter copy at Import, where he basically is saying like, this is not going to be what you've read from me before, So I think it's about the best way to handle it. But yeah, he said you got a female protagonist, and publishers want to market it to that YA crowd, get that YA money, and that's why they do it.
right. Well, I mean, in their eyes, it's the smart move because that's what's gonna, pay out. You know what I mean? Maybe for the author who might be wanting to get it into the adult, category. There's just for maybe more to. I don't know. Is that like a more esteemed to be like an adult novelist versus I don't know if like YA authors get a whole lot of clout. Besides, there are some, but I mean, when it all boils down, like that, I feel like the adult fiction authors are probably getting.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot
I
of
don't
people,
know. You know what I mean? Like the YA authors' books are selling more, but
they get more
the
sales.
adult fantasy authors are maybe a little bit more respected. Maybe, or maybe that's just me.
That's kind of like if you have like that that indie rock band, everybody thinks you're awesome, but if you're that band that's pumping out #1 hits, like, oh, you sold out to the man,
you sell out,
something like that. Okay, I know that this is where this conversation is inevitably going to lead here, but you sold me on Empire the Vampire. I would not have done it outside of just saying like, okay, that UK cover looks like something off of a Slayer album or something, so I want to check it out for that reason. But after Malazan, after I finish that, tell me why I should read Baker in the second Apocalypse. I know this is your wheelhouse. So
yes. Well, I just finished my reread of the first trilogy, Prince of Nothing. And god damn, if like especially the third book got even better for me on the reread. I like it even more. So it's one of those, like, there's so many reasons for me to like tell you to read this. I'm actually getting ready to do a why you should read for that. But for you specifically, for you, Mike, the reason why, I mean, I started reading this when I first started reading the books. There was a couple YouTubers where I was like, man, I would like these guys to get their hands on these books. And there was 3 of you. One was Alan from Library Alexandria. And I thought they might be, I don't know, they might be a little too much for Alan, but he might dig it though too, because he's history teacher, right? So like he knows how brutal history can be, and understanding that kind of level of brutality and just the way that Baker uses real stuff that happened. He kind of parallels real events that happened in the Crusades and stuff is really, really well done. And I think somebody like Alan would really love that. Then I have Philip, who, I mean, come on, we all want Philip to read and review all the books because
Right.
he's fucking Philip. And
He'll
he's
tell me stuff and be like, wow, I never knew this.
I
Talk
learned
about first
something.
law, and he's telling me about this stuff about the Industrial Revolution and shit. I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
Every time Philip opens his mouth, I get smarter.
yeah, basically.
But I wanted Philip to pick the books up because, once again, from like an academic standpoint, and I, you know, from being a medievalist and just somebody who has really kind of like dove into the best of fantasy, I think it's something that Philip should definitely check out. And I think he's one of those people that's smart enough that is probably going to pick up on a lot of things that maybe fell at the wayside for a dum-dum like me, you know? Because I guarantee you, I could read these books 10 fucking times and still keep finding shit, you know, like just kind of the nature of them. But for you, you were the other person that I thought about that I would really like to see pick these books up. And mostly because I know that you are a very big Dune fan.
This is
And
true.
I really do think that if you read them, you're going to kind of understand what I'm saying. It's not Dune, but it's got so much of that feeling. There's so much, it feels so much like Dune in a fantasy like setting mixed with some other, it's like, to me, I say it all the time. It's like, it reminds me of Dune mixed with the Iliad, like Homer's, because it's very epic, you know? So imagine something kind of like that. And then when it works into Aspect Emperor, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings meets Dune meets hell. but that's a whole nother deal. Prince of Nothing is one thing that I would actually even recommend to people, even if they didn't want to get into Aspect, which is, you know, the continuation of the story. And even though the very end of Prince of Nothing might leave you hanging a little bit, it's still, those three books revolve around a holy war. And I do think that you could read them and enjoy it and walk away from, I wouldn't suggest it, but you could. The only reason why I'm saying this is because Aspect is going to take you down a path that some just don't want to go.
I've noticed with this series is that people either fucking love it or they fucking despise it. It's so like, I remember back when I used to go to Reddit before I realized it was just garbage. I remember just looking that up. You know, the second Apocalypse series, worth a read. When I got a thread, and it was like, this thread was literally, I mean, 1,000 responses, and it was down the middle. Best books I've ever read, worst books I've ever read. So it's just like, wow, let's talk about a divisive series. But
so I would say, so the things that I could see why people, the number one thing that would make me think that people not getting behind them is most likely just the level of brutality and all that, you know what I mean?
That stuff.
You know, that's the thing though. It's like, if that's not if that's not a bugaboo for you, then like, it's like the next thing I would say is they are very dense. They are very dense, you know, and that's one of those things. Was I was wondering how you were going to think about Blood Meridian. I didn't really like Blood Meridian, but the prose, like in the way that it can kind of go, like just be a lyrical and verbose at times, and just kind of be a lot describing a scene. That can happen in Baker's books, and sometimes
that wasn't my problem with Blood Meridian.
yeah, and that wasn't either. That was the part I really liked about Blood Meridian, but there was
I think McCarthy's a great writer. Really, even he can get away without using punctuation. You know,
I know.
No, with that book, it was just like, man, these are like cartoon villains. This is ridiculous. You know,
it was way different than what I expected. But
there's a gentleman on my Discord, Brent, one of my moderators. He started reading Malazan with us, and he tapped out about book 4, and he started picking up us because there were some people doing some read along of the second Apocalypse on the Discord. And he basically said, this is what I wanted from Malazan the whole time.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
yeah.
Okay. So he says, it's just as dense, but it makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, it's very introspective and philosophical too. So it's like, if you're into that kind of stuff, in which I'm sure you are with the whole Dune thing.
God Emperor is probably the most philosophical thing I've ever read. Yeah.
So, and that's the thing, is I haven't gotten to God Emperor, but I can, and I'm going to, you know, but the thing is what I guess I kind of expected to get, or what I expect to get out of God Emperor, is a lot of what I got out of Prince of Nothing. You know what I mean? And really going back and reading it again, man, I don't know. It's such a good series. honestly. Somebody described it the other day. I met a lot of fans through this whole deal, you know, and I got a buddy, Christos, over in Greece, who I talked to, and he described it really well, that like the series is like an artistic cage that you get caught in, you know, and you're just, you're not even mad because there's so much to marvel at. You're like, like, but you will always be stuck there once you read these books. Like they do haunt you.
It's like people are very, very passionate about it.
I am. I know. I mean, I named my son. My son's middle name is after one of the characters from stories.
Wow. Yeah. See, my wife wouldn't let me do that. You know,
I got lucky. I had to like consistently come at my wife with that one.
I tried slipping a Paul or an Atreides in there as much as possible. She wasn't.
There you go.
All right. Well, I have like 2 series like that. I said finishing Malazan in June. I was like, I'm gonna kind of like let my brain reset, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I would not suggest tackling something like I've read Gardens of the Moon, which I have heard is not the greatest representation of Malazan, but still, I understand that there's a lot going on in Malazan. You know what I mean? I can read Gardens of the Moon and tell you there's a lot going on, and there's still 9 more books to go after that one. So
they only get longer.
It's a lot of goddamn shit. And I'm like, the Prince of Nothing and the Second Apocalypse is going to take up a lot of your brain power. They're very demanding reads, but they're satisfying. This is a work you're going to work, but the reward is massive, and it makes it into something that feels real. By the end of all 7 of those books, I had like personal relationships with some of these people, you know what I mean? Awesome. Where I was like really fucking mad at them, you know, or in love with them, whatever, you know what I mean? They were very real to me. And
it sounded like me at the end of Wheel of Time.
I loved them or I hated it. I loved them. That I had been waiting for someone in fantasy to do for a long time. Like I hadn't really been this impacted since, you know, years ago, like Mark Lawrence probably. Like Baker was the next like big, like, poof.
Well, I got 3 series that I said I'm going to let me bring reset after Malazan 2023 tackle these, and it's between Alistair Reynolds' Redemption or the Absolution Gap. Is that what those books are called? Anyway, his sci-fi trilogy, which I actually think is 4 books. I actually got corrected on that. It's 4 books now. Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun, and then of course Prince of Nothing. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not doing all 3 of those at once. So I was like, I'm going to try to pick through that. But you threw the Dune word out there at me. So of course, I think that's sitting in the power rankings at the top right now.
I'm not alone in that either. I guarantee you there's a lot of people that will agree with, like, it's just, you get massive Dune vibes. And it in the best ways. That's why I was like saying, it was like, when I read them, I was like, dude, Mike needs to get his hands on these, man. I guarantee you he'll like it. You know, and the cool thing is like, it's fantasy, you know, so it's not like another sci-fi version of Dune. It's fucking like fantasy version of it, which is just dope.
Yeah, they went through all 7 of them on the Discord. They've won a month, and usually when those read-alongs are over, I'll delete those threads. I archived that one so I can go back and go through it while I read it.
They did all 7 books.
Yeah,
they did
all 7 of them.
Yes,
most of them. That was the thing. Is like so many started with Malazan, and maybe 3% of those people are left, you know, where I'm at now.
I love hearing people getting into Second Apocalypse. I really love it when I hear them say that they love it, because it's a fact. There, as much as those books are very much for certain people, they're also not at all for others.
Yeah. I was saying that like, with that, unlike the Malazan, though, it seems like just about everybody that started that finished it. So that's what I'm encouraged about, you know, so that doesn't feel like, I think Malazan's probably got the highest tap out rate I've ever seen.
In my opinion, I think the 2 books that are probably where people might drop out are the very last 2, because it's where it gets the most dense, the most crazy, and just the darkest shit I've ever read.
As long as I like the characters.
I can say this though, the thing too, like it was so dark. Like at one point I remember being like having to kind of really like mull over some stuff and being like, man, do I like this?
That was me when I was reading a Song of Ice and Fire for the first time, and I was like just staring at the wall blankly a couple times. Yeah. Like, what? Why do I read this? Why do I do this to myself?
But you know, as time would click by, I kept finding myself just being consumed by the story and just like thinking about it all the fucking time and realizing it was like, dude, I love this shit. That was the thing about Aspect Emperors. The first book, Judging Eye, when I got into it, that was probably my least favorite book of all of them. So I was kind of worried that I wasn't gonna like Aspect Emperor, but then the next three I ended up like loving one after the other more than the other, and it just yeah. I'm excited to go back and read Judging Eye now on my reread, knowing what I know, because I feel like I might end up coming out of that with like falling in love with it. I still really liked the book. It just wasn't like the 6 out of 5 star kind of review deal.
Right. So what about Malazan? You think you'll ever go back to it?
Yeah, I'm just like, dude, for me, it's such a tall ask, man. It's a lot of goddamn books.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
And you
like,
can't binge read them. I don't care what anybody says. You'll go crazy if you try to binge
yeah,
read
that's
those
how I
books.
feel about it. It's like, I feel like I'll start it and then maybe get like 2 or 3 in, and then it'll probably be a while before I continue. I do this all the time. I'm doing it right now with Dark Tower. I'm like, I need to start book 3. I've needed to start book 3 for fucking months, but yeah, and I love the series.
I need you to start book 3.
Like, I need to start.
They're doing a read along of that on my server right now. Every time it's the 19th, they're doing a new book on the 19th each month. So they just started Gunslinger.
Oh, nice. I love Gunslinger,
Yeah,
man. What a
me
great
too.
fucking book.
Like to the point,
Yeah,
like I was
to
doing my
start.
reread. I'm thinking about jumping on board with them in April when they get to Wizard and Glass and just kind of
Yeah.
finishing it.
Yeah, I hear Wasteland. I think Wastelands is probably going to be probably one of my favorite ones too, just from what I hear about it. I'm like,
It's
yeah,
great.
it sounds like my kind of book. But yeah, there's
I can understand if you don't want to go to Malazan. I understand that. Like it's one of those things that I don't regret it. But here's the thing: is like people ask me that, do you recommend this though? And I'm like, I don't know necessarily I can recommend this series to anyone because it really depends on you. It's not just about the time commitment. It's just like it's not going to click for everybody, guys.
Yeah.
It's, a lot of people, oh, I've read like Harry Potter. Can I read this? I'm like, you can. You ain't gonna know what the hell's going on. I was like, look, I've read a ton of fantasy, guys, and I'm confused as shit.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like Malazan fans will tell you it's okay. Nobody understands it their first time. I was like, well, I'm not rereading this, so.
I've actually kicked around the idea because I'm one of those guys who stopped. Like I started A Song of Ice and Fire years ago and then fell out pretty quick. But I was also one of those people that just didn't read, at the time, I think it was like 2013. Didn't really read that much. I had read books, but I just wasn't reading all the time. And I saw like the first couple episodes, I think, of the TV show. And then I ended up picking up the book and I read a Game of Thrones. And I think at the end I was like, I'm not into it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, but the thing is I guarantee you if today read it, I'd be like, God damn, this was awesome. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for it. And so I'm kind of kicking around the idea of starting A Song of Ice and Fire.
I would be in support of that, but that's kind of how I feel about Name of the Wind. If I try to do Name of the Wind again with the right expectations instead of what I had that first time, maybe I'd have a different experience. So the get out of jail free card I keep saying is that if he ever releases that third book, I'll reread it. And so I was like, I feel safe about never having to reread this book. So
yeah. I've never read Name of the Wind. I think I have it. I've never got into it. I've heard amazing things. My buddy Evans, shouts about it and stuff, and everybody seems to love it. Even the people that don't like. I think it might have been Scott on your Discord that was like, I don't even know what that book was about, but it was amazingly written or something.
That's what it says. Oh, the writing style is so beautiful, and they're like, I can listen to Patrick Rothfuss describe like grass growing to me. I'm like, well, then no wonder you like Name of the Wind because that's what he did.
Yeah, I'm like, descriptions are cool. Is like, I don't get me wrong. I love a nice, writing style or good, heavy prose and stuff nowadays. But still, I do want the story to be moving along.
Plot and character is my thing. Yeah, you don't got either of those.
Yeah,
it's gonna be tough for me to get into. Now, I told you I have been curious about Beyond Redemption for a long time. That was one of those that I think it was Mark Lawrence himself put out like some kind of like rating scale.
Yeah. The grimdark. We're nailing it down.
And that was number 1, and that was what actually got it on my radar.
That's actually a pretty good list. I don't agree with it 100%. I mean, that doesn't mean shit. But
I'd really need to get into the data points and see how they came with this.
But because the thing is, it's still like anytime you go to a poll, popularity comes into effect. You know what I mean? So certain ratings are maybe a little bit more blown up out of proportion than they should be because people just like the author more than that it actually is a dark book. But either way, that's still a pretty good list for people that are like really new to the genre or whatever, or don't know a whole lot. I would definitely point them towards that because it's at least helpful.
So
And
would
yeah,
you
he's
say that
got the
that book
number one.
works? Would you say
He's
that
got
book
the
works
number.
as a standalone?
Does it work as a standalone? Yes, it does. I mean, it is a series, and I couldn't help but just jump immediately into the next book. It was one of those. Like Beyond Redemption was my favorite book since, like, before I had read the Baker's books. Beyond Redemption was a very, like, the shining fucking
Yeah, I saw you still have
success
it pinned.
story.
You still have it pinned on your channel. That's still like
Yeah,
your go-to
I
review.
love it. I mean, it was one of the biggest, like, it's probably, it might be my favorite book, like, not meaning like the one I think is the best, but just the book that really fits me. Which is hilarious because that book is so gross. Like, it's full of, like, his prose is, he really came at it from like a nasty deal. There's just snot and everything. It's just it's perfect for grimdark.
Huh.
But honestly, though, too, I wouldn't say it's the darkest grimdark book out there. There's definitely some dark and dastardly nature to it, but I would say that the Baker's gonna like get him on that further down in his series, or really just Anna Smith Spark. Anna Smith Spark's first book,
I have
Court of
that
Broken
trilogy.
Knives.
Yeah.
It's very fucking, that whole trilogy is brutal as all shit, and I would say that's darker and more brutal than Manifest.
You know, the thing about the Anna Smith Stark is that I actually first was interested in that series, and I was reading an interview with her about like her influences, and her biggest influence was Prince of Nothing. So
Yeah,
I actually ended up buying her books based off of what she said about a series that I hadn't read yet. So
yeah,
do
yeah.
you
I think if
recommend that
you read
series
her,
though?
I think if you read the Empires of Dust books, I think you will see some of that. I mean, she has her own style so much that is like, she's very lyrical,
Yeah,
very
that was.
lyrical. And sometimes it can get repetitive, but I mean, it can also be some of the most beautiful writing, which is crazy because she's also writing about, guts falling out and shit and this and that. And you're like, why does this sound so poetic?
Yeah, I talked with her back when I was still on Twitter about this, about where is that fine line between grimdark and nihilism. And she said her book, she always gets accused of going just to nihilism because like literally nothing good ever happens, like ever.
Right.
So that's why first I realized I was like, no one really knows. It just basically if you have a characters that are not good guys or bad guys, or just out for themselves and nothing good happens in your world, everybody just it's grimdark. It's like, well, I mean, it's the difference between grimdark and like pieces of shit, Because I mean, like
Yeah, yeah.
Joe's grimdark, but I find myself rooting for a lot of those maybe Sandan Galacta is probably one of the least decent people in fantasy, and
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah. He's well
So
written. He's so
yeah.
well written. Yeah, Joe Abercrombie really struck gold with Glocka.
So if
Man.
I love your characters, I don't care how brutal your world is because I want to see them protected, and I know that I'm going to end up letting that guard down, and then you're going to do something really bad to that character. That's what I consider grimdark because I end up liking those characters, even though it's like in real life, me and this guy probably not my kind of guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it when people put out those questions like, oh, what fantasy world would you love to visit? Or what character would you
Not
love
very
to
many that I
meet? And I'm
read.
like, literally all the worlds I love and all the characters I love, I want to be as far away from as possible. Like,
Right? Yeah, no
I'm
thanks.
like, if I saw them on TV, it might be too close. Like, fuck.
Look, man, in the States, guys, we have this thing called central air conditioning. I don't want to live in any of these fantasy worlds without it. Maybe that's just because I live in Houston. It's very, very, very
Dude.
hot here. So
Yeah.
sometimes there are some authors that I think, okay, I don't think Mark would particularly like this author, but I would still like to see him read it to see what he thinks. Because you do, like I said, get this reputation as like this grimdark guy only. But would you say you still like you some traditional fantasy and stuff like that every once
Yeah.
in a while?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
blood and guts all the time, right?
No, no.
So
The one thing I love probably the most in fantasy is like, I love, this is whatever. I love like love tragedy in fantasy. Like, I love tragedy in fantasy, but when it's like kind of wrapped up, like Baron and Luthien from the Silmarillion is literally like one of like, that shit will make me cry, and I love it. Like I look for that kind of stuff when I get into books. I want to get like a strong emotional um like feeling, and I love tragedy. So it doesn't have to be from blood and guts. It could just be like a really heartfelt deal, and that's enough to really keep me turning the pages as well. I'm an aesthetic guy, and I do love me some blood and guts.
Well, that's why I wanted to recommend John Gwynn, because that John Gwynn is like one of my favorites right now. And I think that the way you read, you'd probably blow through his first series in a week, because it's just such a page turner. That's one I'm just like recommend to everybody right now. So I was like, this is just like the fantasy that's not going to just weigh. It's got a ton of characters, but it's not going to weigh you down with a lot of the world building and stuff like that, to where you're going to be like, okay, I need to get an Excel spreadsheet and write all this stuff down and things like that. So I would highly recommend those, because I really, honestly, I just like to hear you talk about them.
Dude, I'll tell you what, this like his new books that he's been dropping have some of the sickest covers I've ever seen.
They're legit. Yeah.
I'm like, dude,
the Norse Viking thing is.
I'm like, I got like all kinds of shit I want to read, but I'm like, you're really enticing me with these crazy fucking covers.
Like, I try to tell people this. I always say, don't judge a book by its cover unless it's awesome. And I can be bought with awesome covers, guys. Yeah.
I haven't finished that one, but it's good. But that cover sucks. On my
Kindle. Yeah.
That cover sucks.
Yeah, the ebook covers are awesome, because they're just a dude with a cloak, or it looks like Assassin's Creed or something. Like, okay, these are much better than those mass market ones. But
man.
Yeah, I'll tell you, series that's been on my radar for a long time, but I have like no immediate plans to read it.
Yeah.
I only know Stover from his from the Star Wars stuff.
Jedi stuff, right? Yeah. Like that. He wrote Traitor and shit. Like Traitor.
Oh shit, I forgot you're a new Jedi Order guy like me.
Yeah. Awesome. Like he wrote Traitor, which is like, that's the first like Stover book I wrote, and that's one of my favorite fucking Star Wars books. It's like, because fucking Ganner Rhizoid is a bad motherfucker. Goddamn. We could sit here and talk for like 3 days probably on Star Wars.
I wish it's like, when you talk about what does, and people always jump on me, oh, do what you want to do, don't do stuff, because it's like, look, I got a decent sized audience and I want to give them what they want. You
have a channel.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm not doing stuff, I'm not letting them dictate what I make, but what I say is like, I want to listen to them. And if it's something that they don't want to hear me talk about, I was like, okay, I won't do it. So Star Wars stuff, I wish it did better, because I would love to talk about the EU more, because hear you. That's the universe I've spent the most time in my life. Was the Star Wars.
So yeah, like when I first got into reading, it was Anne Rice books, but there at the time there was only so many Vampire Chronicle books out. I think she was up to like Blackwood Farm or Blood Canticle or something like that, and I smoked through all those books, and then I was like, well, shit, man, I can't believe how much fun I had reading, but now I'm like, I don't have anything else I want to read. And that was very important to me, because I realized one of the reasons I never read was because I didn't really find anything of my interest. So then I started thinking, I'm like, well, what things are you really into? And it was like a light bulb went on. I'm like, dude, you've always loved Star Wars, and there's probably a bunch of books out there. I went to my library and fucking started just checking out Star Wars books, and they weren't even like they'd be like many books apart from one another, so there was like no cohesion whatsoever, but I didn't care, and I just devour them. And then that's when I got onto Darth Bane trilogy, and that's what led me ultimately into New Jedi Order, which is funny because timelines couldn't be further apart, but it's just how it worked. And I fucking loved New Jedi Order. I was like, it was my mission to read like all the 19 books, you know what I mean? For a guy like me that didn't read a whole lot at the time, reading a 19 book series was like a flag on top of the mountain. Like, look what I did.
Yeah, I was reading those as they came out. They were coming out like every 3 months. There was a new one every 3 months. It was great. I try to tell people, it was like, this was like the MCU of the time, and that they got an overarching vision, but they had like a new director come in and do each one. That's basically what they did with that series. And I always hated this. That Star Wars fans were just like, oh, I don't like it. It's gotten too dark. I was like, look, guys, I've kind of grown up, and I feel like Star Wars, it's time for Star Wars to grow up. And I felt like that's what New Jedi Order did, is it got dark and, characters started dying and shit. And then I was like, they needed a new enemy besides just the Empire. And I thought they, Yuuzhan Vong were fucking amazing, so I
mean, honestly, it took me a little bit to get used to them, I guess, just, like, from being such a rabid fan, like of the films and stuff, because the Yuuzhan Vong are so much different. So it took me a little bit to get used to them as an enemy. But what I think what really intrigued me about them was just that the fact that they were an extra galactic race, so the Force didn't work on them.
Yeah, it did made
And
it.
that
Jedi
was
were
when it was
really
like,
OP at the time. Yeah,
okay, now this shit just got a lot more interesting because these are challenging as all fuck now. And then they started doing some really cool stuff with just the like the Vong creatures and the terraforming and shit that they were trying to do. It was really cool.
yeah, it did the passing the torch to the next generation.
Yeah, and that's the thing
Right.
too. It was like not
would-
only that, like you said, it was doing grown-up stuff. So for those of us that grew up with Star Wars, we were getting hit with a little bit more mature storytelling, and at the same time, a torch was being passed off to the solo kids. And dude, some of those, like the stuff with the solo kids, is really amazing.
Mhm.
There is some true like heroism and just like what it is to be a Jedi in some of those stories. Like some of that shit will really bring a tear to your eye, especially when you start dealing, I don't want to spoil anything for
Yeah.
those that still want to go into it, but it's
Yeah,
awesome.
Unifying Force, dude. I was reading that at like 2 a.m. the night it came out, and just tears.
Yeah.
It really was. It felt like the end for me, and that was just so
Yeah.
good. But yeah, so satisfying. So it's rare when I find other people who actually like the new Jedi Orders. There are a lot of people that like the Star Wars EU, but they're always like, yeah, but I kind of tapped out midway through the new Jedi Order. And I'm like, how did you do that?
What's funny is you're one of the probably one of the fewer people that I have found that are really on board with new Jedi Order. There's so many people I met that were like, nah, I didn't really like it. Blah, blah, blah.
It needed something new in him. It's like all those people that are like, oh, I like Last Jedi because it did something different. No, New Jedi Order did something different, but still, didn't take a shit on the property.
I'm like, how did it do something different by doing the exact same fucking thing that we've been doing for fucking 6 movies?
Yeah, that's what I've been saying watching Book of Boba Fett. And I'm just like,
that's my whole thing is like, look, I'm not here to be a fucking downer, and I'm not here to shit on stuff, you know what I mean? And I'm not even gonna say, I can honestly say that the newer Star Wars movies aren't garbage. They're just not
good.
up to snuff. They are not nearly what they took away from us.
Yeah,
so you took away all this stuff, all the source material, decanonized dozens of books, dozens of authors' hard work, and people's time that they spent reading is all now gone. So you can bring in and just basically rehash shit that already happened fucking over 6 minutes. Ugh.
Yeah. This
kind of makes you want to slap dudes in the face because you're like, man, you are an asshole.
So I said I gave it a chance when it happened. I was like, hey, I understand they don't want to be holding to this stuff. They want to have their own creativity. But I said, here's the deal. You're going to decanonize that. You better do something better.
And yeah, that's it. It's like, if you're going to take it away, I'm mad, but I'm okay. Like, all right, like just give us something. I was excited.
Back. New Star Wars movies.
You know what I mean? Yeah. If you take 5 pounds, give us back 5 pounds. It'd be cool if you gave us 6, but whatever. The scales tipped very not in our favor.
And you think the thing was we were like, hey, we need to get this out of George Lucas's hands. He's lost it. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore. Now we're like, Jesus, can George come back?
Yeah, exactly. Like, please put it back in George. Fucking yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I what you mean about I'm not the guy who just like shits on everything. It is I know people.
I don't want to be. You know what I mean? I could be. I could definitely do that.
Definitely. There's a lot of people. I like to focus on positive stuff. I've said that, but I also don't like being a wet blanket. I know there are people who are still very much enjoying the MCU movies. I'm like, I'm not really into them anymore. So, but I'm still going to talk about them because
for sure. Yeah, I don't want to like throw any stink on something that smells good to you. You know, like for sure. Like enjoy your stuff. You know what I mean? Don't let me ever change your fucking opinion.
Are you watching anything right now? Any shows or anything?
Man, I'll tell you what I found while I was sick that really floored me, and I can't stop talking about it, is that show Dark.
Oh, Dark's amazing, dude. We watched, we watched all 3 years. Yeah,
I binged it, dude, in like 4 or 5 days. I watched all 3 seasons, and I was just like, this is my shit.
So well written. Yeah,
so well. And I guess those guys are getting ready to do a new show.
1899
or something like that. So. Yeah, I'm interested in watching.
After Dark, I'll watch anything. I'll at least give anything to a try.
Same. I was just like so impressed with it that I was like, I am so on board with whatever these guys do.
And there's times with that. It's like it's one of those kind of things where you said with Prince of Nothing, where you had to like put down and think about it. It was like with that, it was like the writing was so good, and the things that came full circle. You're like, oh wow, like revelations of who certain characters are and stuff, and it just like makes your head hurt just to think about it because it's so good.
And the crazy thing, it's funny you even just mentioned Prince of Nothing, because watching that show, I guess I was rereading too, but man, it made me kind of, there's some things, especially when you start dealing with like determinism, like, oh, is everything kind of predetermined? You know what I mean? Is there no free will? You know what I mean? Are we all just kind of playing our parts in a show that was fucking written a long time ago? That kind of stuff started messing with my head big time, man. The show Dark and reading Prince of Nothing, like, or really this whole Second Apocalypse deal, can really start to mess with your head. You can just like start to kind of go into an existential like drop where you're like, okay, fucking nothing matters anymore. Like, like, it doesn't matter what we do, it's all predetermined. Fuck me, I can't even make up a fucking decision for myself. Oh yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I mean, that and the new Witcher show, dude, I love the Witcher show. I know that it gets a lot of hate. Fucking love it. I don't care. I'm
Witcher
here to
season
say
2 was amazing.
I'm such a dude. So here's the thing too. I really, really liked the first season. I love the second season, but I went back and watched the first season right before season 2 came out. Dude, I liked season 1 even more.
Dude, my gripes with season 1 were just like they needed more budget on like costuming and stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't care that people were like, oh, the timeline didn't make sense. It's like, I got it as soon as you just saw that place that burned down, and then the next
Honestly,
episode you see it not burned down.
I
knew what
kind
they
of
were doing.
liked that because I was a little confused at first, but I liked that it made me kind of have to do a little detective work and kind of be like, oh, I'm getting it now. Like, this is actually
people loved it when Westworld did it, so it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was dope as shit, dude. And the guy they got playing Yasker or whatever, the dandelion character, awesome. Like, he is so good, dude.
Dude can sing his ass off too, man.
Dude, he's actually in a band. I guess they have some song, like somebody the other day like posted something that was like, we deserve an album by Yasker or whatever. And I was like, yeah, we do. And someone's like, well, you're in luck because there's these. And I was like checking it out. I was like, holy shit.
My wife said that we were watching Ferngully. You remember that movie Ferngully? And Tim Curry was one of the voices, and he had a song.
Yeah, he was the smog guy.
He was like, I wonder why Tim Curry never put out albums, after this and Rocky Horror. I was like, he's got like 6 albums. They're just not in the States. And I played some for her. She's like, wow, what an incredible voice. So yeah, it's funny how that works.
God, Tim Curry's amazing.
Oh, a legend. That's one that's
Legend is one of is a movie that scarred me, and like also just like really I attribute a lot of like the creepy fantasy shit that I love to Legend.
Oh, for sure.
Because
I still can't think of goblins and not think of that movie.
Yeah, I think I watched that when I was 6. I think I was 6 years old when I first watched that. So probably too young to be watching it. And Blix scared the fuck out of me. Meg Mucklebones gave me nightmares.
The lady in the lake thing.
Yeah, she gave me nightmares for fuck. She is like, her face is the icon or whatever for my Discord, because people are always I'm like, look, this woman gave me nightmares forever. Like, she deserves to be the fucking
I think when people talk about fantasy movies, that's one that kind of flies under the radar. That and Kroll.
It's one of my favorites.
Talk about Kroll. Kroll and Legend were staples for me when I was a kid, man. I love those. And Dark Crystal.
So good. Dark Crystal. I just finished, or no, I think I still have an episode or 2 left of the show. I'm
so heartbroken we didn't get a season 2 of that. It was so good. It was magical.
Dude, I was like, I watched an episode of it when it first came out, and I just kind of forgot to keep watching it. So then me and my wife just recently started watching it, and I was like, God damn it, I love this.
Dude, it's so good. It was like, oh my God, they're making me like feel sad about a puppet just now.
Yes,
dude, so good. Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, it's a shame we didn't get season 2 of that, because I thought that was one of the really good ones.
I mean, we grew up probably like similar. I mean, I was born in 81, so you're a little older, but I still I grew up in the 80s, and in the like early 90s was my
Jim
childhood.
Henson was it, son. Yeah.
And yeah, you mean like Labyrinth was such a fucking heavy hitter, when I was growing up. There's some fucking cool.
You might be the first person I've talked to that even remembers Kroll, so that's awesome.
Kroll is so good. I like
that little star shit when they were a kid.
Dude, I was really blown away when I watched it the other day with how much, like, how many of the scenes and sets are still like very like they're just stunning even to today's standards. Now there are some shit in there that is very dated, and cheesy as fuck, but
like the
the
guy that
swamp
morphs
scene, and there's a couple scenes in there that, like, dude, I don't give a fuck. Like, even to today's standards, you're not shooting shit that beautiful. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I like the my wife still likes the fire horses. Pretty
Yes,
awesome. But
dude, the fire mares, dude.
I kind of not really nightmares, but what scared me a little bit about that movie as a kid was when they would kill one of those things and they would go like
Yes, dude.
it's
The
nightmare fuel,
Slayers,
man.
the Slayers making the creepy ass sound. That was dark and disturbing, man. Like that just like kind of
That
skin
was the only
chilling.
reason I was kind of scared to show it to my kids, but man, they loved
Yeah,
it. They thought it
yeah,
was
I could see
awesome.
that. Yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah,
we
I
ended
remember as a
up,
kid, I loved Ergo or whatever. Ergo the Magnificent, the guy,
mm,
the shape changer.
yeah.
That
Oh
guy.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
he's
great. Great actor too.
yeah,
So I
fucking
just
awesome.
kind of got into manga, and it all started with Berserk, which
Yeah.
I know that you are a fan of as well. I actually see them on your shelf there.
Yes, I'm like
Um,
way behind on it, but I mean,
yeah, I've been
I
stuck on the same arc for a while now. But to be fair, this arc is like 20 volumes, and
yeah,
so
that's insane. That's
it can
insane.
happen. But I think Claymore was one you recommended to me once. Is that
That's
one?
my favorite, man.
Really?
I'm sure because, like I said, I'm like on volume 4 of Berserk, so I'm just scratching the surface. Uh, but Claymore, I've finished the whole thing. It's like a 27 volume deal. It's finished. I've read the whole cocksucker and I love it. Like, I
You
just
like it
can't get
more
it.
than I know you have like a whole channel for Vampire Hunter D, don't you?
I just started reading those the light novels, and I love those as well.
Yeah, I've only done Death Note and Berserk so far. I want to start Vinland Saga because I love
Yeah, Claymore is
basically you
what.
take anything from like Scandinavian, like the 10th century,
Yeah,
and put it
Vinland
in a
Saga
dramatic
looks
setting. I'm going to
dope.
watch it,
Yeah.
or read it.
Yeah, there's another, what is it? Vagabond, I think
Yeah,
looks really
Vagabond.
cool. But yeah, I haven't really gotten into that much like manga. Just like I guess I'm kind of picky, you know what I mean? I'm like, there's like a certain, Berserk is really like the perfect, you know what I mean? If I had to describe what I was
I
looking
think so.
for, I
Yeah,
would
for you and I,
describe
definitely
Berserk,
Berserk is just
you
right.
know. But Claymore was something I kind of just because I knew of Berserk, not really the manga. I watched the anime, the like CGI movie.
Uh,
I don't know if you've seen that.
the one that was on Netflix for a while. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like a
it's like a
three-parter. Yeah,
3-part or whatever. I watched those years ago and I fucking loved it.
yeah,
I know a lot of the fans of the deal
yeah.
like
They
hate
trash
it.
it, but I enjoyed it. Yeah, and I don't
I
even
thought it
watch
was
anime.
I
So
thought it was the coolest shit. I was like, dude, I need more of this, and that's how I kind of discovered Claymore. Um, and man, once I got into Claymore, there's only one, I think there's only one season of the anime, and then they like canceled it or whatever. But the fucking, like I said, the manga is finished, and God, I just got so into it. It's weird too, because it's like it's one of those deals that it's like super female heavy. There's like barely any dudes in it whatsoever. And it's what, like, if you described it, it would kind of sound like a girl power kind of like girl power version of Berserk. But man, I've never read something with so many female characters in it that I never once was like, where's the dudes?
yeah,
Like, I don't give a shit. I'm like, all these chicks kick ass. They're fucking great. Like it's pretty cool. And the story in Claymore is kind of neat because you got these women who are basically turning themselves halfway into monsters to fight the monsters. And so it becomes this thing, they're kind of rejected by society because they're looked at like monsters now. So, like, how do you come to grips with, living a life where no one really accepts you, yet you're the fucking one that they call on when they need their dirty work done? And it's pretty interesting.
yeah. See, I have way more added to my to read manga list than I've actually read so far. I used to be a big comic guy, huge, and I just felt like comics in the states, just the big
Dude,
three,
I
Marvel,
started
Image, and
doing the
DC.
Comics Quest thing on my channel, trying to like talk about comics, and nobody wants to listen.
Yeah, same here.
I think the like most, one of, I think the first one I did got the most because people just weren't like really sure what it was yet, and then when they watched it, they're like, "Oh, we're done with these."
I had a
I
video
get
about
like
it.
50 views on my comic book videos now, and I literally keep doing it because it's what I like to do. I want to cover it. It's kind of what keeps me interested in wanting to keep doing this shit. So whether it gets 0 views or not, I'll probably keep doing it. But god damn it, do I wish people would want to watch it.
Yeah, I think besides Berserk, none of my comic stuff did well, like at all. I mean, I was going to do a why you should read on Saga, which is one of my
Yes.
favorite
Oh, dude,
comics.
you're the reason I picked that up. I picked up the first. I actually picked up all three books. I've only read the first book. The like the big chunky guy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved
The art
Saga.
and everything about that is just so
Yeah.
great. You
The
can read them
one I would
quick too.
throw back at you, actually, that I think you would dig is you might have even read it. I don't know. It's called East of West.
I have like the first 10 issues because I was really getting, I was when I first realized I was walking away from Marvel and DC. I was like, they aren't doing anything I like anymore.
Yeah.
So I started getting into Image because Walking Dead had pretty much come to an end, or at least an end for me, where I was pretty much ready to walk away from it. And I said, I'm gonna check out some other Image ones. So I picked up that and Saga, and that's when I discovered Saga pretty much at the same time and just blew through that.
Right.
You like it though?
Dude, I love it. It's finished. You know what I mean? I think that it's one of those things at the end, I felt very satisfied, but there was also some stuff, that kind of, you're like, did it feel a little rushed or maybe this? It's one of those things where I think I was so into it. There was no way to end it where I was going to be 100%, this kind
Maybe
of
the
reminded
only
it kind of
series like that ever had an ending that I walked away from and felt like I was satisfied and I don't need any more was Preacher by Garth Ennis.
Preacher. Dude,
Preacher.
I never finished it, but I read the first like volume or two of that and I loved Preacher.
It's awesome. It stays awesome pretty much the whole time. But yeah,
Did you
it's a
like the
very
TV
satisfying.
show?
That was one of those things like I wish that I hadn't read. You see how people were like just flipping tables about Wheel of Time right now? That's how I was with Preacher, where it was just
Yeah.
like
No, I
you
get,
have a
dude, because
network that's going to let you do the controversial shit in this comic, and you're not doing it. And
dude,
that's what
so
really
like
pissed me off
and
about
I
it.
wasn't even, balls deep in Preacher comics, but I had read enough to know like when I started watching that show that it didn't line up. And I was like, fuck, dude, like
It
fuck,
was like I recognize those characters, but I was like, this ain't that story like at
Yeah.
all. So I made about a season and a half before I finally it's like it's not ever going to fix itself.
Right.
I got the guy that played Cassidy was just awesome. He was perfect.
Yeah, I did like him a lot. I thought his performance was like dead on.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. So it's one of those where I said maybe if I hadn't, because I had a lot of people that were like, I never read it, but I enjoyed the show a lot. So sometimes it's like I do wish that I was further. That's why I didn't read Foundation when Foundation was coming out on Apple. I was like, I'm not going to read the book because I want to just watch one of these shows and just enjoy it for once.
Yeah.
Instead
It's
of
actually, to
nitpicking it.
me, I think it's almost smarter if you haven't read the books and they have a live adaptation, do the live, and you want to do both, do the live adaptation first. I know a
I've
lot of
always
people will
been
argue
read it
with me,
first.
but the thing is the book is always going to be better. The
Yeah,
book is
yeah.
so it's like why get a watered down, like do your experience on the upward, right?
I think The Expanse is what's getting me off of that because with The Expanse, I was said, oh, okay, well, I watched the first season, I loved it, and I said, okay, well, I'm gonna read the books now, and then I realized I was like, yeah, but I'm ruining all the good twists and turns on the show. I feel like I'm getting spoiled here. So that's
like,
when the first one I said, okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch the show first, then read it. So what do I have to do to get you to read more Stephen King?
Not a whole lot. I mean, with his, you mean like besides Dark Tower?
I think you've read Rise of the Dragon too, right?
So Eyes of the Dragon I never finished it. I want to go back and finish. It was like Eyes of the Dragon was like one of those books that sat around in my living room with growing up. And it was like my whole family had read it. And it was always one of those things that made me want to read it. It was like, whoa, my mom read it. My dad read it. My brother read it. And I remember my mom telling me some part about how like a prince picking his nose or something like that. And, I remember being like, oh, that's so cool. I want to read it. But yeah,
those illustrations kicked my ass as a kid, man. Those illustrations.
yes,
so
dude,
rad.
those things are like embedded into my head. Like I remember when I saw them many years later, it was like I was like, oh my god, like these are those fucking images, man.
Yeah.
I will say too, like whoever's, I don't know if it's the same person, but the guy, whoever's doing the illustrations for Dark Tower, like on the Plume versions.
I'm not sure.
God, those are amazing, dude. They're just some breathtaking illustrations.
Sorry.
There's like
No,
the one where
can't do
like
anything like this. Your
just,
phone doesn't ring.
there's just like bodies spread, like the one part in
Yeah,
Gunslinger.
yeah, told.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. It's
Good
fucking
stuff.
awesome.
Well, I mean, I know that King isn't going to be for everybody, but I'm excited because he hasn't really wrote much fantasy outside of Dark Tower. When he wrote Eyes of the Dragon, he got like such a backlash from the fandom. Basically, it inspired him to write Misery about how awful fandoms can be when they're basically telling you you need to do like this and how dare
Is
you write
that
a fantasy
real?
book.
That's
Yeah.
where Misery comes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
dude,
About basically the fandom was like attacking him, telling him he was only allowed to
I
write about
didn't
horror.
know
Yeah,
that. That's awesome. I
yeah,
love the Misery movie, man. That shit freaked me out.
yeah, definitely. But it was announced today his new book coming out this year is going to be a 600-page epic fantasy book, and I'm like, holy shit, yes, yeah. It's called
Oh,
Fairy Tale,
dude.
and it's
Yeah.
parallel worlds. You got an animal companion, you got coming of age. These are all the things I love by Stephen King, and now he's going back to fantasy. I'm like, 2022 is already the best year since 2019 for me because of that right there.
I think Salem's Lot is kind of like on my list of like definitely want to read
Oh,
from him.
yeah, definitely. You like Anne Rice and you like the Empire of the Vampire. I think you're gonna love it.
Yeah. That one. And then I kind of always wanted to read Pet Cemetery just because the movie fucking traumatized me when
Yeah.
I was a kid.
He
You
wrote
know the
that screenplay, so it's pretty faithful to the book.
the part where the wife is like recollecting her sick
Yes,
sister.
Zelda. Zelda is the biggest nightmare fuel of my childhood.
No, 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 no. Dude, I would literally like stick my fingers in my ears, close my eyes, and just like, like whenever that part would come up, you know what I mean?
Never
Because I'm
sleep
like,
again.
oh,
Yeah.
God, dude, it was.
Yeah, that's amazing, amazing makeup. It's like everybody would trash that movie and be like, "Oh, it was a product of its time." It's so in the '80s trashy. And then that 2019 Pet Cemetery came out, and I'm like, this is traumatizing because this is terrible. Yeah,
uh,
so yeah, the '80s movie has some stuff that I'll be like, what are they thinking with that? But yeah, Zelda, yeah, that's always going to be here as
so
something that
well done. I
terrified
mean,
me.
it really tapped into something that just was disturbing,
Yeah,
unsettling.
that was actually my first encounter with Stephen King. I saw that movie long before I read the book. So yeah, that will always that and what, Pascal, whatever the dead kid who's talking to him. Like, oh my god, yeah,
Yes.
that movie's got to. You watch that movie when you're young, man, it'll mess you up a little bit. So
Yeah, the dead kid that like kind of guides him or what was the other one? Like the growing up, you know what I mean? It was like a lot of Stephen King stuff was made into movies, you know what I mean? Or, like not necessarily the greatest movies, but they were like all his stories were being turned into movies. Remember, I loved it personally. God damn it. It's the one with the graveyard shift.
Graveyard
Graveyard
Shift.
shift.
Wow, I didn't
I
know that about it.
loved Graveyard Shift, the movie. I'm sure if I went back and watched it now, I'd be
Yeah.
like, this is a horrible piece of shit. But when I was a kid, I thought it was like the coolest horror movie out there, man.
No, it's been a long time since I watched, but it was like, yeah, there's been some real stinkers, but there's been some ones that are bad, and I still like them. Like people think Thinner is like one of the worst. I love that movie; it's so fun. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that guy, anything he like, they're buying up movie rights or streaming
Oh,
rights
I'm
now before the
trying.
book comes out.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
Institute
Because
wasn't even out, and they'd already ordered it to series. So
they know it's got potential, right? I
yeah,
mean, Jesus Christ, how much of his stuff? Trying to think, I was like, dude, there's so many Stephen King movie or adaptions out there. It's pretty
yeah.
nuts, right?
Yeah, him and Crichton. It was like that's my guys. Him and
Right.
Michael Crichton. It was like everything they put out a movie, and they almost always ruined it. Like always. It was like, why you guys are not reading these before you decide to make these movies?
Oh
But
man. Dude,
I
I
don't know.
really loved the Jurassic Park movie when it came out.
Sure,
I
who
never
didn't?
read the book, but I mean, was it kind of a horrible adaptation?
Not really. It was different. It was
Yeah.
different, but it was more family friendly. Whereas the book was very much a horror book. It was very
Okay,
much sci-fi
gotcha,
horror.
gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, these raptors were basically just murdering the shit out of everybody in those books.
Dude,
So
that movie fucking blew me away when I
yeah,
first watched it.
yeah, that's one of those. It's kind of like The Shining, and then I think that the book and the movie are both great, but they're very different for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we just
Yeah, he
reread.
doesn't like the Shining movie, does he? Just
That was always the rumor.
or am I
The true story on that is if basically Stanley Kubrick was just a dick to him when he was
Mm.
on set, and he's saying like this isn't how it went. And Stanley Kubrick basically threw him off the set. So I'm
I could
sure
kind of
that would
see
piss
that.
me
I mean,
off
not
too.
that I knew Stanley Kubrick, but I mean, I've heard plenty of stuff about him. You know what I mean? And especially those style of directors,
Yeah.
or they got a vision and they're not letting anybody fuck with them. Not
Yeah.
even the
So
person that
I think that
originally
that really
created.
kind of played into it. I mean, what he said was like in that movie, Jack is like already insane, and that the book is about Jack being a normal guy who goes insane in this place. So I get where he was coming from. That's all he said. And basically, Kubrick like threw him off his set and like banned him
Yeah,
from the premises and stuff. So I was like,
that's
yeah, I can
funny.
see.
Because Kubrick did a Clockwork Orange as well, but he did like the American version of it and not the like UK, whatever, the actual version of it that has like one more chapter. Because the version that we are mostly used to here in America, it just kind of really ends on a note, and it's like, fuck, this was a really fucked up movie. But in like the actual completed story, there's one more chapter where you see like the character kind of, you start to understand it's like a lot of this shit is wrapped up with just his age. He's a young kid doing stupid fucking shit, you know what I mean? And then just with getting older, that stuff doesn't seem so, you know, attractive anymore. And it's a big part of the story. It gives it like a whole meaning versus it just being a tale of violence, you know. But like Americans, we just need the violence. We don't need the fucking
Would you take my film credit card away from me if I told you I've never seen a Clockwork Orange?
No,
I own
not at
it.
all, man. I mean, for me, it was something I wanted to watch, you know, like, because
I love Kubrick. I don't know why I've never watched it. I just never
I
did.
always had a, you know, I mean, I was always kind of an outsider kid, and I loved the weird shit, and I wanted to watch, you know, kind of the all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you the thing that's amazing. This is one of the things, if you haven't, it'd be funny to see how you react to watching that, because of the main character, Alex, who is like the main inspiration for Jorg Ankrath.
Oh, okay.
So
he's a
like, yeah,
lunatic.
basically Mark Lawrence basically was like, hey, I want to see what happens if you take this character and put him in a fantasy setting.
Huh.
And yeah, and then and that's the thing, is if you watch Clockwork, and it made so much sense, because when I watched Clockwork Orange many years ago, I remember being like, dude, I really like this movie, and this character is so intriguing, but he's also doing things I cannot get behind.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you're like, how, I'm so conflicted why I like this guy, you know? But yeah.
I don't think you grow up in the 80s and being very impressionable and not loving horror overall. I mean, people think that you guys are just psychotic or whatever. It's like, man, you guys don't understand. Like, in the 80s, horror had its renaissance. It really did.
When it blew up, you know what I mean?
So, a lot of the ones that were just violent as shit, we loved that stuff.
Because the guys that were already doing horror in the 70s finally got like their heyday. You know, you had like John Carpenter and Wes Craven. It's not like they weren't making movies before the ones that were hits. They'd been making movies. Most of them were low budget and no one really watched them or whatever.
And Tom Savini was basically a rock star during that era. The makeup guy,
dude, he is awesome.
Yeah,
I love that dude.
I think when he got a role in that, not Tarantino, but Robert Rodriguez movie, From Dusk Till Dawn. He got a role in that. I was like, this is so great. It's like full circle for that guy.
It's perfect to have him in there for sure, and his role in there is it's just so.
I like his cock pistol.
That's the fucking dude. Was so. I mean, who wasn't talking about that pistol? You know, at the end of that movie, you know, you're like, dude, the fucking cock gun.
So with horror, I know. Obviously, you probably have gotten this experience as well, in that fantasy does decent stuff on Booktube. Sci-fi and horror is kind of hit or miss. I mean, Moyd specifies in just sci-fi, so I think he's found a real audience for that. I feel like if I try to go outside of that comfort zone, horror or sci-fi, it's very hit or miss. Have you had the kind of the same thing with horror and sci-fi when you try to branch out?
Kind of. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's definitely. I remember, what was it? Nosferatu or whatever by Joe Hill. I read that, and I like it. Wasn't like I didn't like it, but it was also something where I was like, man, I just realized I'm not really into it. You know, there were parts that I liked or whatever, but then that's what it kind of made me start to realize, it's like, maybe I do have a kind of a little bit harder time with horror, as much as like I like some of the stuff. There's, you know, maybe a lot of stuff it's just not exactly, I don't jive with. Sci-fi, on the other hand, fucking dude, I love sci-fi. Love it. Like, honestly, especially when it comes to film, it's probably my favorite kind of movie to watch is sci-fi.
Yeah, who didn't grow up with Star Wars and not love science fiction movies, you know?
Yeah, you know, and then like on it, like I loved the old Dune movie that everybody hates. You know what I mean? Like,
I have parts about it that I liked a lot.
But mostly
Chris Verrocchio, we reviewed that. I said there was some things I said that I thought that 84 did better, you know?
Yeah, so. I mean, for me, like what kind of rolls back in, like I'm a total aesthetic guy. So when I see something and it just like resonates with me, I'll like always kind of keep it near and dear. And those costumes and just like the look and feel of that 86 or whatever it was, Dune, was dark.
I think that Harkonnen costumes were terrible. Everything else was pretty good, but I did like the way that he made it feel like a really dirty, lived-in world. You know, it didn't
Yeah.
look like sets; it looked
Yes,
filthy.
and that's
And I
a
thought,
big thing for me. This is one of the main reasons. One of my biggest complaints with the Wheel of Time show is that everybody looks so clean.
yeah, new. Yeah.
I'm like, look, you guys are traveling hundreds of miles through the woods. Why do you look like you all just got out of the cleaners? I'm like, not a speck of dirt on you. Like, and I know that's stupid, but that's the little things that get me personally, as you know, somebody. I'm such an aesthetic guy that like that shit will pull me out of your story if it like, I don't know.
You know, and on the flip side, you look at The Witcher, and I was like, Henry Cavill looks like he just got fucking shot out of a whale's asshole the whole damn show. And he's filthy, he's bloody, his hair looks like it hasn't been washed, his clothes look ragged. Yeah, I think that's something they definitely do better.
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. Like you're like, dude, this is like you. He looks filthy. He looks like he's not having the greatest goddamn time.
We're out in the wilderness
covered in all that shit.
Months at a time. You're not going to look nice.
No,
I agree with that.
That was, I think, probably my biggest. I haven't read the Wheel of Time books, so I'm not one of those people that's going to come into it and be like, oh, they changed all this shit. I'm like the perfect person for that show to reach because I don't know what you're changing. So I'm just here to take it as at face value, a fantasy show. I think my main reasons, the only thing or the things I didn't like about that show were the pacing and the sets, costumes being too nice. But other than that, I enjoyed myself.
That's how my wife feels. She hasn't read them, and she didn't like the last episode that much. I mean, she did like it at the time, but she said she not. Now that she's thought about it, she's kind of like, I don't feel like I remember the ending because it didn't feel like it had an ending. So
yeah,
that was like her big gripe. Me and Madison leaned mostly positive on it, and that got us a lot of hate because we have read the books.
Well, I've seen that there's a lot of people that are pretty pissed, but I mean, you can't do anything anymore without pissing people off.
That's fine. And I mean, I get it. Like I said, I just went through a Preacher, and people were like, well, I haven't read it, so I don't care. And I'm like, I understand that, but you can't ask me not to tell you how I feel about it.
Dude, right? Good.
Before we go, I kind of want to ask if you have any like fantasy hot takes. And what I mean by that is like someone who says like, Lord of the Rings was good for its time, but I think it's aged out. People like that. Do you have any fantasy hot takes?
I do probably, but they're probably all more wrapped up with more recent stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, mine is that Name of the Wind is not that great of a story.
Yeah, Poppy War is mine. And it's actually a funny deal because I read the first book and I liked it. I actually liked it way more than I expected. Before I started reading that book, I've caught myself getting ready to read it to rip it apart. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had to stop myself and go, look, dude, you can't do this. You know what I mean? And one of the reasons why I wanted to rip it apart is because it was getting so much praise and all this shit. And I was just like, I wanted to read it and be like, you are all fools. You don't understand. This is garbage. You're like, you don't know shit. Like, well, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, but I realized that I had a negative outlook. And so I stopped that before going into it. So then I just read it for what it was. And it was a good story. But the one thing I want to say is that story has been told 100 goddamn times. It reminded me of so many other fucking stories. So don't try to tell me it's original. Yeah. And then then they're like, oh, but she put in like, these parallels of real world stuff, and made it like, uncompromising, adaptation into fantasy. I'm like, well, that's fucking cool too. And I can appreciate that. But she's not the first one to do it.
Right.
Like I literally just talked about Baker, who in the 90s was doing parallels on our own history and coming at it from a very uncompromising fucking, viewpoint. That he was not taking it easy on us. And it really shows you how fucking brutal shit was like back then. So I guess the further I got away from the Poppy War, the less and less impressive because even at the end of it, when I liked it, it wasn't like a 5-star book. It was just better than I expected. But the further I got away from it, the more problems I guess I started to find.
I've read the second book, and I like the first one a lot. I like the first book a lot. And the second book, I was just like, I don't really like Ren at all. And it got to the point where it was like all this stuff's happening at the end. I found myself like not even caring. So I didn't even read book 3. And that's where I'm like, I've got all this shit that I want to read. I'm going to stop forcing myself to read books. It's like, I'm not going to DNF very many books, but I will DNF a series if I'm not digging it.
I'm with you there though, too, man. I mean, I feel like because of reading, like running a Booktube channel or whatever, like I've read a couple, like, some books I probably didn't fucking give a shit, or I could have not read and been plenty, happy about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm definitely at a point where I'm like, I want to read what I'm fucking into, what I want to read. I don't do TBRs because I don't want to lock myself into something that I'm way too much of a mood reader. But yeah, I mean, Poppy War for me, it just it's tough, man. It's tough, and it gets so much praise. Like the 2 of the 3 books landed on the top 100 fantasy books of all time from the Time magazine. Fuck those guys. Don't know what
I
the
think
fuck
that panel might be, I don't know.
That was so fucking egregious. My other issue is, once again, it's not a big deal, but whatever. You know what I mean? This is one of the reasons why I kind of want to start my channel, because there is a lot of other channels out there. YouTube probably doesn't need another booktuber, but goddamn, man, if there isn't some very big booktubers who will do something like, and I'm not talking about you, but I'll just use this example.
I still would consider myself a big one. I'm in the middle.
They hate Jorg Ancraft, and they will fucking tell you about how horrible piece of shitty this guy is, to the point where they're like, I don't even want to fucking read the rest of these books. And then they'll fucking talk about Rin and fucking Poppy War, who is easily doing
genocidal,
tremendously horrific shit to innocent people. And those same people that have condemned Jorg turn around, they're like, oh yes, but Rin has experienced this and that, and there's a reason why. And I'm like, well, there's a reason why Jorg does shit too. So you can't fucking do, you're like,
I got this a lot. I really liked Lycanius, and I'm hearing these people tear Lycanius apart. I'm like, aren't you talking about how great that was in Wheel of Time, and that you don't like it when Lycanius is doing it?
That's what I'm saying. It's like, people are like, some people they choose what they want. We all do. We all choose what we want to like and what we don't. But the thing is the way that they portray it, and I guess it kind of makes me mad because of the amount of people that are listening to them. And I'm like, God damn it, dude! If you got 250,000 people watching you, and you just like sat there, it fucking like shit all over this book, that's a possible 250,000 of people that are just not even going to ever even touch the book because you said that.
Yeah, I talked about that with these. Is the Nevernight is, I feel like all the people that are telling me they're not reading it, and I've asked them why, and they basically will quote bigger booktubers what they have said about it. I'm like, read it for yourself and find out, guys. Yes. It's just always the way I've been. But I was like, yeah, that happened like Lycanius, and I felt like it bombed Lycanius because of that same reason. So I was like, I've got other people, like, I think except one person, everyone on the Discord that's reading us right now is loving the series. They're like, why have I not heard more about this? I don't know. I think it's just been misrepresented.
Yeah, that's a big thing, man. And it sucks because it's, like I said, when you got a channel with that much, of a following, it's hard to argue with them.
Yeah, I always get a lot. Oh, I was going to read that book, but blank booktuber told me it wasn't good, so I decided not to.
Dude, and that's why, like, I'll, even if I don't like stuff, but I understand what's in the story, I'll be like, look, it wasn't for me, but I still highly suggest you guys go out there and try it.
Oh, I spent 10 minutes trashing Name of the Wind and told people read it yourself and make up your own decision.
Because that's the thing, is it doesn't fucking matter at the end of the day what I think. What do you think? You know what I mean?
Always going to be. I think probably my biggest hot take besides that is that Liza Lochlamore is just okay.
Yeah, dude. That was the hardest book for me. I read it last year. Finally, it was like the one I've DNF'd 3 times. I think finally made it through, and I really liked the story. But there's a lot of story there for how much it's like a 300-400 page story to me, but it's 700 pages long.
Yeah. Maybe it was more of a narrative thing. I thought the dialogue was really good.
I got really bored. I got really bored.
I almost fell asleep. I understand you're setting up a long con, but I don't need to hear about how you're setting wine prices and shit. It's kind of what I said about Malazan. I don't need to know about you crashing the economy to help with the war effort. I don't need 200 pages on that.
And I understand though that for some people, it's like they will love that because it makes them even more like immersed in the world, and they feel like it's real and not just something that you created in 5 seconds. But for some of us, we just want to push on with the story.
Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at. That's why sometimes I'm like, maybe I am just like a simpleton on some of those stuff, because we're going to be reading Beowulf, and Wolf and I are going to be talking about it. And I was like, so basically, guys, if you want to see a 20-minute video where Philip's getting really into why everything's so existential and everything's amazing, and I'm just going to be like, Yeah,
Remember
Beowulf's
that?
mom was a bitch, huh?
Yeah. Remember that time he swung that sword?
Yeah, that's gonna be me.
That was cool.
No, but we can always count on that with Philip. You said that you get smarter every time Philip opens his mouth. I don't know. I think I feel dumber. I never looked at it this way, and now I'm like, huh, why did I not see that? Yeah,
Yeah, man. There's so many times I realized, like talking with him, I'm like, man, I realized I've thought the wrong thing, and not like just like I had like some, even just with words. I think it was misogyny. I had like been misusing the word misogyny for probably my entire fucking life. And then all of a sudden I have one conversation with Philip and now I'm on the right road.
yeah. All I gotta do next is have him on and tell me that my grammar is incorrect and be like, wow, I've been saying that wrong all my life. You know, and he'll probably be right. But you said that with Alan, he's a teacher. And I know that he loves Daniel Abraham a lot. And I think about, just say what I didn't like about these Malazan books doing stuff like talking about crashing the economy or the war effort stuff. I know he loves that Dagger and the Coin series a lot. And that makes me think, is that what that series is like? Because that would make a lot more sense about it being like,
yeah.
I don't know if I would. I'm not crazy about military fantasy. I've learned that with Malazan. It's one of the things I'm not nuts about. It's why I've kind of kicked Black Company down the road quite a bit.
Yeah, don't feel guilty for that one, bro.
Yeah, that's what I've heard a lot. So it's making me wonder, is economic fantasy going to be something I'm into? Probably not. And I work in finance. I don't want to feel like I'm working, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought I was really into military fantasy. And then I started realizing I was like, maybe I'm actually not that into military fantasy.
There's a lot of sitting around campfires.
There's some military fantasy stories I really like. But when I actually started really understanding what military fantasy is, I was like, man, exactly. A lot of standing around, a lot of strategy and shit that I guess I don't care too much about. Because one of the things about Black Company is there's a lot of that happens in every fucking book. And so after, like, I'm like, I just read 3 books and I feel like all we did was sit around and talk strategy. like I'm really like, I have 2 books left in that series where I was supposed to have already been done. The read along kind of fell apart. I mean, it is what it is, you know. And it's funny because I'm the one going like, oh, once you're in the Black Company, the only way out is feet first, because it's like a saying in the books. But then here I am dragging my fucking feet on the last 2 books.
Mine was everything that I've complained that I don't like about these Malazan books. People are like, wow, that's like all Black Company is. I'm like, really?
I would say this, like, I definitely still like the first 3 books in the series are some of the most like just wild, imaginative like rides, man. And it really tapped into like what fantasy used to be, but with adding this, like, at the time, a very newer, like darker level to it. You know what I mean? It gets heralded as being like, you know, one of the precursors to grimdark, and it certainly is pretty, you know, dark and dastardly at times. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's not exactly what it was all like shaped up to be, in my opinion. You know what I mean? I'm getting ready. I have like to do my Grimmy Awards for 2021, and that's like the one that's probably like, I have this one award. It's called the Hot to Not Award.
Yeah,
and I think that company might have gotten that one. So we'll see. I still got to mull over some things, but there are some great things about that series, but they're at the same time too, it's pretty goddamn long in the tooth, and you just feel like you're like, didn't we already do this?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm big about it's better to burn out than fade away. Some of these series,
but then you'll see these people that are old school fans, and they won't even let you be like, oh, I don't know, I kind of got bored. They're like, what are you talking about? This is the most amazing fucking.
When I said how much I love grimdark, they're all like, well, you haven't read a Black Company? You don't like grimdark? Then I'm like,
oh, okay. Dude, I don't think that, you know, I mean, Black Company is a great example of where like the name grimdark comes from, I think, because it feels a lot like Warhammer. It's like fantasy style Warhammer, but with like a little extra darkness thrown on it. So that's where I would see where people are like, oh, you don't like grimdark? That's so dumb gatekeeping. But I just don't think the Black Company is the best representation for grimdark. But I'm not, I mean, that's me personally. I will tell you, I think Broken Empire is, but like people will be like, that shit's too much, you know? That's the thing. It will never, everybody has to decide for themselves what grimdark is. I can't tell you. At one point I went out there and I tried to, you know, fucking go on a quest where I was going to define grimdark for everybody. And that was the most ignorant, arrogant shit I could have ever done. Because who am I to tell you what something is? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Grimdark, this is funny, is like grimdark is just like love. You know, we all can probably agree on some general things about love, but ask 9 different people, get 9 different answers.
Absolutely.
You know, when it comes down to the complexities or subtleties of these things. And that's basically what it is. For me, I think a lot of it has to do with your entry point, and because mine was fucking Broken Empire, it set the mold, and it was like things need to be overly fucked up and dark and just fucked it, you know what I mean? So then when I got into the lighter stuff, I was like, this doesn't feel very grimdark. It feels hilarious.
Right. I think that is the perfect way to put a bow on this one. Is Mark telling us exactly what grimdark is, which is different for everybody.
It is really, you know what I mean? Like, I encourage everybody. This is my big thing. When you are thinking about, oh, this is grimdark or isn't it? Just think what pushes it from dark fantasy or low fantasy or even adult fantasy into that? What is it that you think makes it that extra like bit of dark and dastardly? You know, because then you have to also understand fantasy is something that's always going to be changing. The landscape is evolving. So things like where I used to think grimdark was a lot of flipping tropes, kind of like anti-Western postmodernism kind of stuff. Not necessarily ringing true anymore, because fantasy has been written for so long. People are having to flip tropes just to keep it interesting. So now regular fantasy will zig where it used to zag, and it's not just grimdark that's doing this stuff. So think about that. Just think like, what is it that made this extra? You know, why is this not low fantasy? What's making it grimdark? Because when it all boils down, though, too, is grimdark is a secondary thing. You are reading either a fantasy book, a sci-fi book, a Western book. It just happens to have that grimdark, you know, nature to it or whatever.
And there it is, guys. So why don't you let all these wonderful people know where they can find you outside of just your YouTube channel, which I'm going to link below. You on social media at all?
I have my Instagram, but it's really like I do my tattoos and stuff. It's my name. I mean, but really, I just really for my channel, I run my channel and I run my Discord. That's pretty much the way I link it. I used to do more stuff like on Facebook and stuff. It's too much. It's too much for me. I gotta like do a couple things, you know. So yeah, I have a Discord. It's just the Slowly Read Discord server, which really was born out of your Discord server.
I am always happy to have you there. I know that you're busy taking care of your own stuff, but
God, man,
basically anytime someone shows up and they got like a sleeve of tattoos, I always tag you like, dude, what do you think of these?
Yeah. I always like looking at tattoos.
Yeah. So, well, I thank you so much for joining me on the weekend here. I know it's never easy with the old familia. In fact, mine's banging on my door right now. So
I know.
I hope I have muted it at the appropriate times. But thanks a ton for doing this, man. And
thanks for having me on. I love this little segment of yours. I remember watching the one you and Moyd like over. I think it was like 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, that's where it started out of nowhere. Yeah.
I should have been doing 4th of July things, but I spent 3 or 4 hours watching you guys.
Kind of bored out enough. This is from my podcasting days. I love to just, as much as I love talking to my audience, it's nice to have someone to talk back to, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
As a booktuber, I think so. All right, man, have yourselves an awesome weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.